Hi everyone. If this video looks sort of familiar, it's because it's a re-upload of a video I put out about a week ago, and then I had to take it down because there were some issues with the B-roll footage that I captured. So this one maybe is a little bit more of a talking head video than it was originally intended. If you got to see the original video before I took it down, nothing new here in terms of information. If it's a new video to you, hope you enjoy it even in this form.
Hello and welcome to the Dan O'Can YouTube channel. As you can see from the sign beside me, today we are at the Atlas Coal Mine National Historic Site, and we are going to check out not only the mine, we are also going to dive a bit into the history of coal mining here in the Drumheller Valley. So let's get right into it, shall we? As you can tell, it's closed for the season, which is perfect because that means we don't have a lot of people to deal with. Well, we have toured the mine before on the channel. Well, we've toured it a couple different times, once on the channel, I think. The highlight of this site is the giant coal tipple that you can see there in behind, because it's a very symbolic and important structure both for this site as well as for the history of coal mining in the valley.
And we're here today with fellow YouTuber Fotoman Calgary, Neil Young.
Hey, I'm Fotoman, and I'm here with Team Danocan. So it's really cool to be out here. So if you're ever in this area, make sure you stop out here.
So I guess before we get too far along, I should explain what a coal tipple is. And the tipple is basically the central processing facility in a coal mining operation. Its main functions are for preparing and moving the coal after it's come out of the mine, preparing it for transport, sorting it, and loading it into rail cars. So when it comes to coal mining, you can think of the coal tipple as the equivalent of a grain elevator when it comes to grain farming.
What makes this particular tipple really unique and special, beyond the fact that it's the last remaining wooden tipple in Canada, really is because it's the last remaining symbol of what was once a thriving coal mining industry here in the Drumheller Valley. So let's kind of take you back a bit. While the indigenous people of the area had noted black rocks that burned, really you can trace the coal mining industry here back to the first European explorers and Peter Fiddler in the 1790s. And he noted in his journal, as he came through this valley, the outcroppings of coal. But believe it or not, it would be over 100 years before we see the commercial development of the coal mining industry in the Drumheller Valley. It starts with a fella by the name of Drumheller, Sam Drumheller specifically, an American financier and rancher who came up here from the States and saw the promise and the potential of this territory. So in 1910, Sam Drumheller buys a parcel of land from a fella named Thomas Greentree. Now, Greentree was a settler in the area who had discovered he had some coal on his land that he was using for his own personal use. And Drumheller figured this would be a great opportunity to get in here because he could see the potential. So while Drumheller had the vision and now he had the land, the first commercial coal mine was actually started by Jesse Gouge in 1911. And we're talking, this is the early stages of Western settlement. You know, being 1911, Alberta had only been a province of Canada for 6 years at this point. It was the arrival of the railway in 1913 through the Drumheller Valley, connecting it to the larger settlement of places like Calgary, that really set off the coal mining boom throughout this entire area. So from the first commercial mine in 1911, by 1921, just 10 years later, we have 27 different mines operating in the Drumheller Valley. And that gave birth to a number of company and mining towns throughout this area. In about a 30-mile stretch, you had the development of towns like, and I'm going to cheat and read here, Knackmine, Newcastle, Midland, Drumheller, Rosedale, Wayne, Sunshine, Cambia, Willow Creek, Acadia, Ideal, and the one that we are standing near, East Coulee. Now, some of these towns actually grew to be quite substantial in size. At its peak, East Coulee had a population of more than 3,000 people. So over the duration of the coal boom, the Drumheller Valley actually saw no less than 139 different mines operating. Coal mining has always been a very rough way to make a living, and the mines that operated in this area were no different. Conditions were very tough. We are talking, this is pre-mechanization, so you have miners working basically with picks and shovels, loading the coal into cars, which are then being pulled out of the mine by horses. Now, a lot of people have probably heard of the famous song by Tennessee Ernie Ford, who, you load 16 tons and what do you get? Another day older and a deeper in debt. Well, in the pick and shovel days, 16 tons would have been a magical number. Even hitting 10 tons for a miner in a single day was quite an accomplishment. Conditions in the mine were very rough, not just for the people, but also for the animals that were involved. The stories go that the horses that worked in these coal mines would actually go months at a time without being allowed to see daylight. They just stayed underground the entire time. They were fed, they were watered, and everything underground. And it was only in the summer months when coal production would slow down that the horses were actually brought out of the mines and allowed to go out to pasture and actually see daylight. So this was a pretty grim existence. So there was an article from the Calgary Herald in 1974 that was talking about, well, funny enough, the article from 74 was talking about how they were expecting the rebirth of the coal industry in the Drumheller Valley and how people were expecting it to actually make a comeback. But the interesting part of the article is they talked to a fellow named Leo Vaast. Now, Leo himself started working at the Newcastle mine in 1921 at the age of 15. And Leo would eventually work 18 years in the mines underground before lung disease forced him to the surface, where he then became a truck driver. But Leo was describing his life in 1921 working the coal mines, and he talked about how it was actually a really good way to make a living. In 1921, at the age of 15, Leo was often earning $2.15 a day working in the coal mines. Now, I ran that through an inflation calculator and came out with a figure around $36.25, if my memory serves correctly. So you can imagine you're working an 8 or 10 hour shift underground in dark, dangerous conditions, doing heavy physical labor, and you're making $36 a day, and you think you're doing really well. And it was a rough existence. Like, this is the Wild West at this point. You have all these boom towns that have sprung up. You have a lot of miners who, are kind of tough stock, and they pretty much live a rough existence. Leo mentioned the gangs would gather with the intent of robbing miners of their pay. And in fact, young Leo at the age of 15 actually had to start packing a pistol with him to protect himself from these gangs on paydays. It was also noted in one article that the town of Newcastle experienced 4 murders in the space of a single week. So, like I said, you're talking the Wild West out here at that point. Now we'll leave Leo for a little bit. We're actually going to go into Drumheller and see if we can locate his grave in the local cemetery. But let's talk about the Atlas coal mine itself specifically, since that's why we're here. The Atlas coal mine was established in 1936 by Dr. Omar Patrick, and he was a bigwig in Calgary who came out here and set up the Atlas mine. And one of the things that set the Atlas apart was it was a mine founded on a reputation of being technologically advanced. It used a mining method that's known as the Cardox method, which instead of relying on explosives such as dynamite, would actually use compressed carbon dioxide to loosen the coal out of the coal seam. And this had a number of different advantages besides being less dangerous. It also resulted in coal that had fewer fractures, which meant it broke down less during the transportation method and was basically longer burning and longer lasting, making it a more valuable product. Of course, even the most technologically advanced mine still had its dangers. And on June the 24th, 1941, a gas explosion here at the Atlas coal mine number 3 actually killed 3 people instantly, and then a 4th man died during the rescue attempt. So tragedy always kind of followed the mining industry. So the coal mining boom that started in the 1910s reached its peak in 1952. Well, actually, the notes I have here say 1955, they pulled out $23.2 million worth of coal out of this valley. Now that's $23.2 million in 1955 dollars, so I don't know what that translates to today. But it's a huge industry. And the funny thing is that the industry essentially disappeared overnight. By 1956, we see the closure of 20 different mines. And that threw over 1,000 miners out of work essentially overnight. And that began to lead to the decline of many of the towns that we listed earlier. So what brought about the sudden end to the coal industry in Drumheller? Natural gas. Natural gas proved to be quite in abundance. It was cleaner burning, and that was kind of the end. You factor in that the railways were moving away from steam engines and into diesel engines, and the demand for the product simply vanished. In fact, that article that I referenced earlier in the Calgary Herald from 1974 mentions that at that point, the Atlas was already serving as a tourist destination. And they were running school buses out to the mine site and offering tours for people. Basically, as I believe the cost was about $2.50 a person. You come out to the mine, do a tour, and check it out. Now, the mine was still operating at that point, but it was only operating about 60 days out of the year. It was essentially being operated and run by former coal miners who would work the Atlas mine as a method of supplementing their old age security and pensions. So the mine would run up until 1979, although I did find some sources that claim 1984. But it was essentially, most people seem to agree, it was 1979 that the mine was finally closed for good. And it remains today a tourist attraction, very much intact and very complete, which makes it a very valuable resource from a historical perspective. There's really nothing else like it around. So more than just a historical artifact, the Atlas coal mine remains a symbol of boom and bust cycles, about changing energy methods and sources. And it really, represents a lot of different things And it's a very precious resource, and one that we are glad has been recognized both provincially and nationally for its significance and its value. And if you ever get a chance to tour it, I highly recommend you do it. We have now, through the magic of video editing, transported ourselves here to the Drumheller Municipal Cemetery, where we're going to see if we can find Leo Vaast, the miner that we sort of virtually met at the Atlas coal mine. Emily is staying with Mabel in the car because animals are prohibited here, and we're going to see if we can find Leo's grave. If we're reading the map correctly, we should be in the right area. And I think, yes, here we are. That was much easier than expected. So here we are, Leo P.J. Vaast, next to his wife Marie. So if you remember from earlier in the video, Leo was working at the Newcastle mine at the age of 15 in 1921. He lived for another, looks like 8 years after recording that interview, or participating in that interview for the Calgary Herald article. And here's where he ended up. Must have liked to fish by the looks of things. Peaceful spot here in the back of the cemetery. So Leo, I hope you don't mind that we use some of your quotes and your experiences in the filming of this video, and just wanted to say thank you for, you know, what you did in the development of the industry here and working in there and sharing that story with everyone. And it's nice that you are remembered. So, from the peaceful confines of the Drumheller Municipal Cemetery, we hope you enjoyed our little dive into the history of coal mining in this area, and the Atlas mine in particular. And offering tours for people, I believe at the cost of, as I back into a piece of mine equipment, and it was essentially being operated and run. We'll let him go by.